Boo. Got him. Hi there. I hope I didn't scare you too bad with that expert jump scare I just put in. It's just, as you can see by the sign I have behind me, it's October, and now it's time to get spooky. So that's what this video is pretty much going to be about. If you're new here, hi there. Nice to meet you. I'm Derek. I do weird videos, and this one's no exception. It's still going to be pretty weird, but welcome. I hope you enjoy your stay, and if you're coming back, welcome back. Let's hope you're ready to maybe potentially poop yourself if you get scared real easy like I do. Now, I myself am a person who generally doesn't like to get scared. I'm not a really big fan of people popping out and rustling my jimmies a little bit. But, I am a big fan of good stories. And one thing that you gotta give horror is that some of them pretty well made, I mean, I can see where people would come from, that sometimes it's boring. They use, jump scares as crutches like I did at the beginning of this video. And, it's just not necessarily as scary as it should be, which personally I'm okay with. I would love to live in a world where scary things don't happen because I'm a big scared baby and I don't like being scared. However, I can understand where a horror fan comes from when they say that it's just not the way it used to be. I mean, if you look at stuff like Saw, It, and you compare those to today's stuff like the Bye Bye Man. Like, I don't know whose idea it was to make the Bye Bye Man, but they clearly weren't thinking in the best sound mind. Horror is just not generally very scary for a lot of people. But I do feel like with the rise of YouTube, the platform you're watching right now, we've been able to see a rise in a new kind of horror, and a pretty successful one to boot. This genre is called analog horror, and as I can best understand it, like as best as I know, it's essentially horror that takes more mundane aspects and more normal things from everyday life and sort of makes them scarier than they already are. Taking something like maybe an emergency broadcast or a local news station, which that actually ties in perfectly because the analog horror that we're talking about today is a little project that a lot of horror fans might know called Local 58. Local 58 takes place entirely on a local news channel frequency. And as things progress over the course of the different episodes we have to watch, things go from being, relatively normal to cosmically horrifying. So, I personally enjoy it. I think it's really fun. I don't like to get scared, but I do like good stories. And I think it's a pretty good story that you could spend a lot of time analyzing. So, welcome to the first spooky video I've ever done on my channel. And this is Local 58 as reviewed by a guy who doesn't like to get scared. Local 58 reared its ugly news station-shaped face back in Halloween of 2017, and during the time when it premiered, there were only 3 episodes that we had the capability of watching. Those 3 specifically were You Were on the Fastest Available Route, followed by Contingency, which was then followed finally by Weather Service. Over the years, though, we've had 3 more episodes be added, with those namely being Show for Children, Real Sleep, and Skywatching. Altogether, the episodes tell a story that you can make multiple conjectures from. You can make multiple theories, you can have multiple ideas, and that's what I think makes it so interesting and makes the story so strong. I mean, I think the intrigue specifically for Local 58 comes from the fact that you have no idea what's going on the entire time. I mean, you have specific thought processes as to where it might be going, but in general, you have no control over the story. And that's what I think is the best part about it. Now, we've been promised more episodes in the future, and maybe as they start coming up, maybe I'll do more, more stuff on it. But generally right now, I'm going to do it on these first 6, and, we'll see how I'm feeling down the road. So let's get into it. Our first step into the cosmic horror that is Local 58 begins with You Were on the Fastest Available Route. And all jokes aside and just kind of commentary, it is really good horror because it takes something so generally ubiquitous that we all use on a day-to-day basis just about and just makes it a terrifying concept. In this video, we see dash cam footage of a car driving around at night, and as it moves around, it's being directed by the GPS that's in. Things seem pretty normal as the GPS navigates and shows the driver where to go, taking them out of town and onto the freeway. Things start to get a little bit weird and a little bit creepy, however, when it has the driver do this.
Continue on unnamed road, then, in 300 feet, turn off your headlights.
So yeah, just a normal night drive, just leaving town, getting off the freeway and just going, straight into the woods and turn off your headlights? You know, just normal stuff. You know, nice little Sunday night drive. You know. Why did I decide to do this? Things I do to get subscribers. I'm such an idiot. So after, you know, turning off their headlights and continuing down the road, I just don't know how to explain this. I'm just going to play this more or less in full. Just watch.
Rerouting. Make a U-turn. Your destination is behind you. Rerouting. In 500 feet. Your destination will be on in 300 feet. Your destination in 250 feet. Rerouting. Your destination will be in 50 feet. You will arrive at your destination. You have arrived.
Wasn't that just so fun and wholesome? You know, don't you just watch that? You just get, you know, like the warm and tinglies in here. You know, doesn't that just make you never want to use your GPS ever again? Because I know it does that for me. Following this video, we have Contingency, which personally, in my opinion, is one of the scarier videos. I think like if we're making a tier list, it's like the second scariest. Just the concept of it is pretty creepy, and you'll find out. I'm about to tell you. The video begins with an end of broadcast day message, which I actually had to look up because I hadn't heard of that before because I'm a Zoomer and I don't know anything. But essentially what that was before TV was 24 hours and you could watch Rick and Morty into the wee hours of the morning and fundamentally destroy your gray matter. You had, you know, essentially TV was like, hey, deuces, we're logging off, it's 3 a.m., see you later. And that was usually the time that you turned off your TV. This doesn't follow, you know, the normal expected path because pretty much immediately after that message displays, we get this. Now, if you're like me and you're a normal, rational human being who doesn't like to get scared, because, you know, that's kind of the normal thing, you're probably thinking, what in the Kentucky Fried, you know, I'm a good Christian boy, but flip, what in the Kentucky Fried Flip did I just watch? And let me explain. Essentially, this message is telling us that America lost, and it's not exactly telling us what we lost, only that to preserve our dignity as a country, we need to off ourselves in order to, I don't know, stick a middle finger to whatever beat us. But my biggest question is, what we lose to? You know what? I mean, you can't just put up a message like, hey, we lost, and expect us to be like, oh, against the aliens? Okay, cool, yeah, no, that's fine, yeah, I'll go get my gun. Like, what do you expect me to do? Like, you know, I'm gonna ask questions, like, I'm not just gonna straight up do that, right? But, I mean, it's pretty much just like, hey, bud, sorry, we made this decision for you, they're coming, so you just kind of gotta do it. We get this incredibly comforting message, which is, this message will broadcast until there are none left to hear it. And then Local 58 cuts it out and is like, hey, sorry, we essentially like, hey, sorry, we got hacked. And which I don't think is a very good excuse at all, but Okay, I guess I'll just have to take that with me, and I guess we're moving on to the next video. We are now at the currently established halfway point of the series, and it's here that we get probably the most terrifying video for myself personally, because it uses one of the most terrifying mediums, in my opinion, that could ever be used, and that's an emergency broadcast system. This video is weather service, and it starts off just like the other ones, normal. You know, it's pretty innocuous, nothing crazy happens. It just opens with the beginning music of Local 58. And then we see this. I'm gonna put a timestamp down here for to like fast forward if you don't like this noise, because I don't. I for sure, when I was finding it to make this video, I could not sleep for a while. So yeah, I'm gonna pass over it. I'm gonna explain it after that timestamp. But yeah, you know, so here's what we're talking about here. What in the doo-diddly-doo-dong dug dimmadome double cheeseburger was that? Like seriously, what was that? I've watched this. I've had to watch this like 3 or 4 times to try and get like some level of nuance to fully understand what this is supposed to mean. And I don't get it. I really don't. Also, before I continue, really quick side note, I want to meet the absolute poop canoe who thought it was a smart idea to make that the sound of the American Emergency Broadcast System. Like there's literally an infinite number of sounds they could have gone with. They could have gone with like a babbling brook, a child's laughter. Hell, you could have Toby, the new intern, just get up there and be like, "Hey guys, there's a tornado headed for Wisconsin. You might want to run." But no, you chose wah, wah. And you thought that was a good idea? You thought that was smart? No, it's stupid. Taking my jokes and chucking them off to the side for a second, let's talk about what this video actually means, what the whole story is supposed to be. Weather Service essentially shows, you know, Local 58 fighting for control. Essentially, there is something big, something that, you know, maybe, I don't know what it is, but something is trying to take over Local 58. It's trying to broadcast a specific message, but Local 58's fighting back against it. The main theme that we see throughout this video is the moon, and clearly it's something pretty big, because you have one side, Local 58, saying, hey, don't go look at it, and then you have another side, this big thing that we don't necessarily understand, saying, hey, do go look at it. On a side note, this isn't the first time we're gonna hear about the moon, and it's only gonna become a bigger thing as we go down the road. But I do want to point out something that's really interesting about the end of this episode specifically. After this big fighting back and forth, we get this message displayed pretty plainly, and it's the 51st state is not a place. I want you to keep that in mind as we keep going. It kind of fits into my theory that when we get there. Before I continue on and continue the story with Show for Children, I'm going to take a quick intermission, quick break. For you, it's going to be like 2 seconds, but for me, it's going to be like a couple days because it's dark outside and I get spooked pretty easy. So I'm just going to hop on to the next one. I'm going to be in different clothes, just so you know. But yeah, we're moving on to Show for Children next. All right. And I'm back. Time to continue the spooks. We are now on Show for Children, which personally for me, I actually think is probably my favorite because I mean, it's still creepy. It's still got like the creepy factor to it because that's kind of the point of it. But it's actually animated like an old-fashioned like black and white Disney cartoon. Like think of Steamboat Willie, but with cosmic horror, and that's kind of what you get. And as far as I know, the series creator Chris Straub actually took time to like stop and like make this. Like it took him a long time. Like I think there was like a year in between Weather Service and then Show for Children and the other 2 episodes. Like it took a long time, and you could tell. And the quality is pretty honestly there, and it's my favorite episode. The premise is simple. It follows our main character of the tune. His name's Cadaver, and he's a child-sized skeleton, so that's cool. And he's doing really really stuff with his time. He's just being he's being real good with the life, or rather afterlife he's been given. He's walking through a cemetery in like the dead of night. So he's making good choices for himself. I'm proud of him. While he's doing his little stepping, his little traveling across the cemetery, up in the top right corner you can see the moon, and it's interesting artistic choice. I would say that this is not a face you trust. This isn't generally like if I saw this, if someone had a face like this, they were coming up to me, I'm assuming they're just gonna try and get me into a pyramid scheme. It's just that they don't have my best interest in mind. So just know that he's there, and just try not to look too much, because I did, and I had nightmares. So just be responsible. As the video progresses, Cadaver comes across 3 different open graves, which that's always a good sign. But yeah, so he goes up to all 3, and each of them have their own specific interaction. So the first time when he gets to the first one, this happens. So, normal, relatively. You're in a cemetery. You're probably gonna find skeletons. I don't know why he's here. I don't know. I don't know exactly the reason, but like he's there. He's just kind of chilling. So Cadaver leaves him alone, walks around, and goes to the second one. And just brace yourself, because the second grave is not nearly as normal as you'd expect, because we see this. Now, I don't know what kind of alien butthole I'm looking at. I don't know what this thing is, but I'm not a fan. Not a fan at all. It's just kind of like chilling there, and just it's not doing anything, and the music just stops, so that makes it even worse. But yeah, so Cadaver, understandably afraid, he goes and he runs and he comes across the third one, and it's probably the most disturbing part of this because he finds the grave empty. So there's our happy ending for this specific video. And I actually kind of find it pretty funny too, is that he's already a skeleton, but when he dies, he turns into a different skeleton. Like, I don't know why that's such a fun little detail for me, but I just really like it. I think it's cool. All right, time for some explanations. So essentially, it's pretty straightforward. Cadaver's walking through the cemetery. He sees another skeleton that's clearly dead. He gets scared. He keeps going. He finds this weird alien looking thing, gets even more scared, keeps going, and finds an empty grave, hops in to hide, and dies when the moon passes over. So what generally can we confer from this? Moon bad. Moon very, very bad. Do not look at moon. Do not pay attention to moon. This very easily ties into weather service and kind of paints the picture of like, okay, hey, yeah, maybe it's best we don't look at this. You know, maybe it's best we just kind of live our lives outside of this and just don't look at the moon. It's by this point in the series, it's clearly established, hey, this is a bad thing. It's also a major theme. Next, we're on to real sleep, which I'm going to talk about, but I'm going to put like very limited recording of it because it uses an actual psychological thing that, not that it can mess you up, like it didn't mess me up, but like I watched the video and I kind of experienced it and I did the full experience like a dork, and it wasn't fun, you know, like this video's been fun up to this point, and like the video's still good, right? It's still a good series, it doesn't ruin it for me, but like I had a serious point where I was like, okay, yeah, no, this isn't fun because it messes with your brain a little bit. The premise of Real Sleep comes from this in-universe science group, and they're essentially putting together a video that's explaining dreams, and which is pretty interesting. You know, I feel like personally for myself, I want to know what dreams are and why we have them. But it goes from being like, oh hey, yeah, these are dreams, and here's how you reach this certain point of sleep, to saying, hey, dreams are bad, and don't sleep. And then it starts to like put these images and these faces up, and I'm just gonna put like 5 seconds of it up. So it's really fun. It's a real good video. But yeah, so essentially what that thing is, it's actually like an actual psychological thing, like I said, where if you put two faces on either side of like a screen, and then you stare just in the blank middle, and then you rotate multiple faces, they'll eventually distort and they'll like look weird and funny and pretty creepy. And in this case, because it's like, because it's the ambience and everything, it just kind of heightens it, which in terms of horror is really good, but like personally for myself, I didn't really care for it. But yeah, so that's Real Sleep. The basics of it is pretty much like, hey, it's this company that's saying, hey, don't sleep, it's bad, here's why, and then it does all this stuff. And now we are on the final video of at least what we have, for now, of Local 58. So can I get a drum roll, please, me in editing? Thank you, me in editing. So we are now on skywatching. Everything aside, this video is really cool. I find it really interesting. It strikes me more as awe-inspiring than it does scary. I mean, it still scares me, but it just seems more cool than scary. It's sort of a slow build into the final conclusion, but it really kind of has a good way of wrapping things up. So to do a basic outline, it follows a photographer, or a videographer rather, who's just kind of sitting on like a hill or a mountain, and they're looking at the sky. And as they're going, they're pointing out stuff like constellations, things, the basic stuff that you look for when you're looking out at the stars during nighttime. Things get a little redonkulous though when they pan over towards the moon. And as they're doing so, we get this title. Our journey then continues with the person zooming in further on the moon, which, side note, that is a really good camera. If you can get that close and on the moon, that's just really good quality. Anyway, so as they're looking in on the moon, we see all these weird structures, things you wouldn't expect to really see on the moon. You see these like cluster of buildings, this like weird triangle that's just kind of there. And as this is happening, you see that there's a big transformation going on with the moon in general. There's all this like dust getting thrown up off the surface of the moon. It looks really weird. It's like there are all these like weird stringy, almost like hair or fur, something weird like that. And as we're just kind of getting a good look at whatever is currently happening, this happens. Yep, yeah, you just saw that. The moon exploded. It exploded and turned into whatever the hell this thing is. I have no clue. I really don't, but yeah, that's the whole video. It's just like, oh, hey, look, there's this throne, and then look at all these structures, and then boom, now it's just this giant Cthulhu monster. On a side note, what's the like responsible way to like react to that? Because like the only way I can think of would be like something like this. Oh man, what a pretty night. This is a good night. I'm feeling good. Well, shit, I'm getting a beer. Honey, you were right, the moon's haunted. I'm pretty sure at that point there's nothing I can do. So that actually concludes the telling you what happens portion of this video. We actually just hit another road bump because my phone is really low and I'm not gonna have enough time to continue tonight. So we're gonna have another intermission. We're gonna have another jump cut. I'm gonna be in new clothes. And yeah, and then we'll finish this thing out with my theories. Man, 3 shirt changes in the same video? You're probably thinking, damn, Derek, you're a revolutionary, which I do agree, I do believe I am. But putting that off to the side, let's talk about my theories. Now, it's fair to say, the moon's evil. I feel like that's kind of the punctuation that we were given with sky watching, and there's a lot of evidence to support that. But I want to talk about something really interesting that kind of ties into my own personal theory when talking about this. Now, it would appear that the predominant theory people are making is that it's an alien invasion story, which I can see how that would be the theory made, but personally for myself, I actually think that this entirely has to do with the moon. I don't think there's any aliens involved other than whatever's in the moon or whatever the moon is. Now, if you're a connoisseur of horror on YouTube and you spend a lot of time researching this and looking at theories on Local 58, the one that I have is incredibly similar to the one that Wendigoon has, which if you've never seen his channel, I'm going to link it down below because it's really cool and he makes scary stuff really easy for babies like me to actually want to watch. But yeah, his theory essentially like posits that the moon is what's causing everything, which this is in stark contrast to what a lot of other people are saying, that it's just a straight up alien invasion story and it's happening in phases. But with this, I think it's more feasible to say that it's just the moon. Yeah, sure, maybe there's an alien in the moon, whatever that might be. But overall, I feel like the moon is the main antagonist of this entire series. We have a couple pieces of evidence that I think hold up this theory, namely how in Show for Children, when Cadaver's walking through the cemetery, the moon's up in the corner and it kind of functions as the main villain of the cartoon itself. And secondly, in Skywatching, when the videographer actually pans over to the moon and writes his throne, I feel like those are some pretty good indicators that the moon is in fact the main villain of the series. I think the biggest piece of evidence to support my theory is at the end of Weather Service, if you kind of hang around for long enough, you see this message. Now, when you first see that phrase, the 51st state is not a place, it doesn't make much sense at all. There's really no purpose to it. But if you look at things, a little bit historically, if you study a couple of things, we actually have a couple bits of information that might actually, add context to this. Now, this is an entirely fictional story, of course, but one of the cool things that I think, from what I observed that Chris Straub has done is taken actual events or actual things and fit them into a story to kind of give it a little bit more authenticity. So when we're talking about the case of, the 51st state, there was a time for a little bit after we landed on the moon in 1969, it was for like a small amount of time, where there's actually a preposition to make the moon the 51st state, which that'd be pretty crazy if we landed and we were like, all right, dope, well, we own this now. So middle finger, Russia, have fun, not being on the moon. So there was a time where the moon was proposed to be the 51st state. Some people actually referred it as the 51st state. And so that's, kind of the first aspect of this. The second part of this is that during the Apollo 11 mission, from like the studying I did, there was about 45 minutes of dead silence. There was no radio contact between either Apollo 11 or Houston. And, the general fear was the worst had happened and they had died out there on the moon. But, after those 45 minutes, connection, reconnected and they were able to come back. So since then, because that information of that time, and because there's recording of Buzz Aldrin and those guys, when they came back from the moon, but that's never been publicly released as to my knowledge. So there's a lot of conspiracy theories from what I could find where people are saying that, the Apollo 11 crew found something and just never talked about it again, or were prevented from talking about it again in some way or another. Taking those into account, this is my theory. So I believe that in the universe of Local 58, when the Apollo 11 crew landed on the moon, during that 45 minutes of dead silence, they found something they for sure weren't supposed to find. And I believe that they found that the moon was alive. It was a real, living, breathing human being. And even worse, by stepping on it and observing it, they woke it up. Now, the moon might have been, I guess, justifiably pissed that, either by landing on it and waking it up or just by being upset by the audacity of man to land on it, the moon is no longer happy with us. And now, from, this point on, it's doing whatever it can to kind of take its anger out on us. Another interesting thing to note is that the order in which the videos are presented to us are not exactly chronological. They cover different points within the story, and that's kind of pretty obvious with the way that the Local 58 logo kind of changes with each video. And, from looking at that, it's very easy to say that it seems like an anthology with some similar things, and I can see where that comes from. But I think personally, we are watching this in non-chronological order. We are watching the story of Local 58 take place outside of a normal standard set of storytelling. It's not one after the other after the other. It goes 5, then 3, then 2, then 4, then 1. Now, fitting this idea that the story isn't exactly chronological, I've created this list of how I believe the series goes. And it goes from, from what I think, it goes from late 1960s, early mid-70s to current day. Now, I believe that the order goes in this, and I believe that we start in the 70s and end at modern day, because starting off with contingency, when we look at it, we see the signature of Lyndon B. Johnson, who was president shortly after the moon landing and during that time. And so where this fits into my theory is I think that after the moon landing and after Apollo 11 came back, after everything that got Lyndon B. Johnson into his seat as the president, I believe that the people of Apollo 11 came to him, told him what happened, and told him just the extent of how big or how powerful this thing is. Now, we don't know exactly, right, what they saw or exactly what they know, but I think it's fair to say that if they did find out that the moon is this big, crazy cosmic being, it's probably fair to say it's pretty damn powerful. So they let Lyndon know and said, hey, if this thing were to attack us, we probably can't beat it. As a result of this, Lyndon B. Johnson had that video made just in case something like that ever happened. And after it was made, it was distributed out into the United States. So I believe that it's not just Local 58 who has this on retainer. I believe that there was a real world possibility within the universe to Lyndon B. Johnson and the people who ran the United States government that at any point the moon was going to destroy the Earth, or maybe specifically America. And so they had this made and shipped out to every local news station in the United States, probably every big one too, to say, hey, for your own protection, let's, get yourself out of the way. This also fits with the overwhelming force language that was used in the video specifically itself. And when a lot of people talk about this, rightfully so, they talk about the sort of propagandic, if that's a word, nature of it, where it talks about the glory and honor of the United States and, stuff. It says stuff like, hey, even when we lose, we win, which is fairly propaganda-ridden. But I do think that this video was made specifically for the protection of the people of the United States. I don't think this was made as a sort of last ego stroke before America falls. No, I think that this was made as a genuine concerned message saying, hey, please, you don't want to go through whatever's going to happen. Just do it. Get it out of the way. And it's using the language of its time, which, after that, there's a lot of feeling of triumph in America for a lot of people. And the predominant thing was, oh, if we can go to the moon, where can't we go? So I believe that the message and the language used for it was to try and, appeal to the people, but it was made ultimately to protect them, and it was disseminated throughout the United States in case this ever happened. Now, I believe that up to this point, nothing happened. The world wasn't taken over. The moon didn't, try and destroy the world. So this was retired. And there's actually specifically a point, I believe, where it cuts off saying, hey, don't premiere this after this certain date. And that could just be if this did premiere and then everyone's gone and it needs to cut off at a certain point. But I think by around that point, that's when they might have assumed, hey, nothing's happened, we're probably okay. And then they had that put off to the side. So then after that, after contingency, I think the next logical part of the story is show for children. In my theory, I think it fits in that the United States, while it's trying to create this thing that, can help people realize, hey, you don't want to have to deal with the moon, I think they're trying to test on different local areas. They're testing their products and their propaganda in different specific parts. And I think that Local 58, specifically it's Mason County, West Virginia, where the story takes place, I think Local 58 and the areas that it serves is being used as a testing ground for this propaganda, which would explain, I think personally for me, why Show for Children is premiering at 4 a.m. of all times. Because there's no kid who would be awake at 4 a.m., especially during that time, right? Saturday morning cartoons aren't really ubiquitous as much as they were down the road. No one's going to be awake at 4 a.m. watching these things. So I think this was put on there and tested specifically understanding the idea that no one was going to be awake. So if at a later time, if at a later date, it needed to be used, they could premiere it. Now at this point, I think there's a chronological time jump. I think after Show for Children, after Contingency, we jump to Real Sleep. And Real Sleep is a little bit different. It seems a little bit more like, I think, the way I think of it looks like a little more 80s, I think. So I think this is where the timeline jumps from that late 60s, early 70s vibes to probably the mid 80s, right? If I, at some point in the 80s, I'm just going to say mid 80s, I feel like it fits that part of the story best, but I feel like that works. So the way I have this broken down is the early days of it being in like the 60s and 70s, the midpoint being where Real Sleep is, I think around the 80s, and then the rest takes place more or less in your modern day. I think Real Sleep is a reignition of whatever America was planning in the 60s should bad things happen with the moon then. And I think that it was made specifically by this in-universe company, right, that talks about it. I think it was made specifically to reuse that idea, but I think they were trying to change it up a little bit. I think they were trying to make it where if they put people on edge enough, if they put people in a irritable enough state, right, by not sleeping, right, if they put them in that kind of thought process, if something big happens, they're a lot more susceptible to what America has to say. Whereas before, Americans might be like, well, no, give me more information. I want to know. I have a gun. I can fight, right? During that time, it's probably a lot more difficult for them to, make people susceptible. But in this case, if you deprive people of sleep, if you distort their image, if you kind of make them tired and irritable or scared of certain things, then when you say, hey, do this, the likelihood of them actually doing that thing is a lot higher. I think this fits with, that theme that I talked about before of like real things being used to heighten and like validate the experiences. Because, like I said, with that real actual experiment that you can do with the faces and looking at the dot, looking in between the both of them, you can change how your perception is of them. So I think, and this is like I said a couple of seconds ago, my part of the theory for this is that America is trying to make people more susceptible to maybe doing rash stuff. If you think about, if you don't sleep for a while and just had a long day and you're tired, the likelihood that you're gonna lash out or do something stupid or say something stupid is pretty high. So I do think that they're trying to up the susceptibility of people by using this. And maybe, right, because in this specific case, I think it's used specifically for one person. I think the purpose of this is to test people and then use it on the general masses. So let's say that the moon kicks it in the high gear, you broadcast this everywhere maybe a couple hours before the moon explodes, and now people are afraid, maybe they're tired, whatever it might be, and now they're gonna be more likely to look at the moon and be like, all right, cool, well, I'm out of there. Now I think we have another time jump before we get to you're on the fastest available route. And I think this point in the story officially kind of begins the end of Local 58. I think that it leads up to the remainder of the show or the remainder of the series, right, in this specific part. So in You're on the Fastest Available Route, they use pretty modern technology, right? It's using a dash cam, it's using a GPS, stuff that we use in modern times. So I do believe that this second time jump goes from what I would assume like the 80s for Real Sleep hops to modern day. And if I'm not mistaken, I think in like the corner there's a picture of like the date that says like 2014. So I'm pretty sure that's affirming, hey, this is the time. So I think that You're on the Fastest Available Route, like I said, begins the end. So you remember how at the end of You're on the Fastest Available Route, we kind of see that monster fall down and that's what takes out the driver? I think that this, right, because it looks like a smaller scale of whatever the moon turned into, right, at the end of skywatching. I believe that maybe the moon is sending stuff to Earth for this grand final battle. I don't think the moon is doing this on its own. It very easily could, but I think that whatever the moon is, whatever sort of weird parasite thing it might be, I don't think it's too difficult to say. I think it's either quite feasible that it might be able to shed pieces of it onto other atmospheres. So I think I think if we're talking about the beginning of the end, I think prior to the moon exploding, prior to skywatching taking place, I think the moon is preparing to take over Earth by shedding parts of itself and they're landing on Earth. So I think this thing that we see is a part of the moon kind of beginning the phases of takeover. And that's kind of where I believe this starts. I think that Weather Service is the final or one of the final acts by the United States government to get people to move to action, with that action being, hey, don't go look at the moon. I think that maybe by this point they've sort of dished the off yourself rhetoric for the idea and the thought process of, hey, we're advanced enough, maybe we can fight this thing. So I think Weather Service is out there and its goal is to prevent people from looking at the moon. But by this point, I think we've also reached the point of no return. There's no way that things are going to get fixed. Now, the moon is in full swing and it's attacking. And so it's fighting back and forth with Local 58 to try and get people to go out and look at it so then it can either kill them or take control of them, whatever that might be. And then I think we finally wrap up, right, this part of the story with skywatching. Now, one thing that kind of pokes holes in this aspect of my theory is the idea that the camera being used to film skywatching is kind of old. It's kind of old-looking technology. It makes it kind of creepier, things like that. It sort of enhances the level of it. But I think that can be used to justify, hey, this part of the theory might be wrong, right? Where I think that's justifiable, I do think that I have an answer for that. Now, the moon has clearly taken over the videography. And when the moon finally does explode, you see them go out and bow down and it says rejoice. So I think that this person, either recently or for a long time, has been corrupted by the moon. Maybe something like as the Weather Service was going on, he looked out, or he, she, whatever, they looked out, they saw the moon and they got connected to it. And maybe the moon told them, hey, go find your nearest camera and come film me. So I think that could be where this sort of fits. It's just an old camera used by a modern person, right? A lot of people have old cameras lying around, and the internal clocks of those aren't necessarily the most secure anymore, right? So I think that if we're fitting this into making this part of the modern timeline of Local 58, I feel like that would be the most understandable connection, right? The most understandable explanation. But of course, I could always be wrong. This is just a theory, and I just think that's kind of an interesting aspect. That'd be kind of cool if that's how they explain it. Now, as we get more videos and more things, coming out over time, hopefully something this Halloween comes out, I'm probably going to be proven wrong. And if you're watching this and you've kind of done your own study, you can probably poke pretty easy holes in my theory. And I actually welcome that. If you think I'm wrong, however you think I'm wrong, please feel free to tell me in the comments, hey, you stupid dumb idiot, you forgot this one thing. I mean, don't say it like that because I'll cry, but but feel free to say, hey, actually, I think you might be wrong here. Because I feel like that's the cool part about this, is the communal aspect where you can come up with your own theories. And I feel like, there's a chance I'm wrong. I'd like to be right, but there's millions of theories. Many of them have to be wrong. So maybe I am. But nonetheless, if you found it interesting, feel free to comment. Let me know, hey, this was cool, or hey, I don't think this is true. Let me know. Tell me what you think. And finally, we're at the end of this video. You're probably tired of my face. That's all cool. But, I actually don't know how long this video is going to be. Might be long, might be shorter if I cut it down a little bit. But I had a lot of fun doing this. I had a good time. This was something that's interested me, over the past couple months. And I thought, hey, why don't I do this for my YouTube channel? So yeah, this is, that's my rundown of the story. This is my theory, just kind of all the basic stuff. Like I said, feel free to let me know if I'm wrong. But yeah, thank you for watching, and I hope you guys have a good one, and I will see you guys in my next video.